I am very happy to introduce tonight's fabulous speakers, Steve and Maria, who many of you who are joining us tonight might already recognize and have had the pleasure of having had as teachers in our prep program. Steve Pritchard and Maria Alexander are master therapeutic counselors, registered counseling supervisors, ClearMind senior instructors, and sought after couples counseling gurus. As partners in their therapy practice and in their life, Steve and Maria draw on their own relationship as well as their experiences of their clients when speaking about their favorite topic, dun, 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 love. Steve and Maria bring humor, compassion, and huge hearts to all as they share, as they seek to shine a light on the friendly universe and the path back home to truth, beauty, and love. So put your hands together for Steve and Maria, and Steve and Maria, over to you.
Oh.
Yay, woo!
I've never been called a guru before. I'm not sure about that.
There you go,
Takes
guru
getting
girl.
used to it. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. I really appreciate your presence. So our talk tonight is based on ideas and concepts that are based on Buddhist mindfulness practices and neuroscience for the most part. And this information dovetails into so many aspects of what ClearMind teaches in terms of what is happening in our basement and the steps that we take to move into more vulnerable, more connected, more real relationship with others.
Also, please know that we are discussing, as we're talking about difficulties in relationship, we're discussing working through the many day-to-day upsets that occur in relationship. This talk is not going into what would be considered more traumatic events such as affairs, betrayals, addiction, or the various types of abuse that might occur, as those may require a somewhat different approach. Right? While the basic concepts discussed here may apply or may be helpful, we don't really have the time to cover those topics to the depth and with the care that they require. All right, so just want to clarify that.
Mm-hmm.
So for folks who hate to wait till the end and want to get a snapshot of where we're heading, we'll share everything in 2 slides. Here's the problem. We have a built-in negativity bias, a good old reptilian brain of ours, which is always scanning our environment for dangers and working to keep us safe. The problem?
And the solution. Compassion and more compassion. So if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. And if you want to be happy, practice compassion, as the Dalai Lama said.
There you go. In a nutshell. So,
falling in love, right? What a magical experience. Our hearts open to another and we feel a deep being to being connection. So we can spend days, months, years fully opened to the joyful, loving, deeply passionate, compassionate, understanding and generous beings that each of us are in that state. And so being in love, right? Isn't that what we all kind of hope to experience? And then something happens.
mm-hmm.
So as a response to childhood emotional or psychological wounding, which we aren't going to go into, a lot today, right? But we develop strategies for emotional survival, defenses, ways of protecting ourselves. And so those patterns insulate us from feeling deeply vulnerable again, the way that we felt when we were little children. And of course, all of the ways that we protect ourselves undermines the very possibility of experiencing the state of love that we both desire and deserve, of course, right? And so the magical experience begins to shift as our deepest wounds and the accompanying emotional triggers begin to surface.
Right? This is where the something happens emerges, right? It's so common that we feel we're right and that the other or others are in some way wrong. They're inferior, they're bad. The more charged our sense of I'm right and you're wrong, the more distant and hostility and mistrust is present in the relationship. All right, each of us is feeling right about being wronged by the other. And then this blame game simply serves to deepen our own wounding. It deepens our mistrust and it begins to shake our very sense of belonging within the relationship.
Mm-hmm. So, this process of creating something new together, like this talk that we're giving to you right now, is not an easy process for Steve and I.
This process. About this process.
It's not.
So I need a plan, a map, an outline, an agenda. I'm very linear. I like linear. Give me a map.
And I might not be so linear, right? I need to feel my way through things. I need to paint on a blank canvas with really bright colors and just go with the flow and embrace and dance all the creative juices that come up in the process. So as you can see, not the same.
Right. So this leads to moments. And we had a moment actually last week. Well,
About 3 days ago, Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. Putting this discussion, this talk together, right? Where I blurt out in the middle of a very heated, frustrated feeling, you're just like Jackson Pollock painting. I have no idea where I am. I have no map. I have no outline. I have nothing, right? I have a whole bunch of feelings and thoughts and stuff. And you're asking if I can feel you and where you're at in the middle of this, and I can't feel you. I just feel frustrated.
Yeah, that happened.
With a little more heat.
So she's a Jackson Pollock painting.
I'm a bit more of a flowcharty kind of guy.
Yeah. So the trance, right? The trance is a concept from mindfulness, from Buddhist practice. So when we're caught in the trance of anger and blame in particular, other trances, our bodies become tense, our hearts become numb or constricted. Our thinking gets really agitated or very rigid, right? Our survival brain shapes every dimension of our experience. And so when we're caught in our own self-centered drama, everyone else becomes the other to us, right? Different and unreal, the unreal other. And the world becomes a backdrop to our own special experience. And everyone in it serves as bit players, the supporting cast. They become, as Dwayne often talks about, the two-dimensional characters, right? These cardboard figures. And our attention focuses on their faults, their difference from us. She's a Jackson Pollock painting and he's a flowchart. And how they are threatening us or impeding us or denying us in some way.
And when this process happens in a relationship, we are no longer a we. We cease being a we. And at the same time, our self-sense narrows and we become also an unreal self, a masked, defended other, maybe a victim, maybe filled with some righteous anger. We feel neither at home with ourselves or actually connected to the other person, right? We become our own two-dimensional characters and we become those characters in each other's inner movie instead of real beings with our own hurts, with our own insecurities. Right? The deeper the trance, the more entrenched we are in this state, the less we have access to our good old prefrontal cortex, where we can access reason, mindfulness, empathy. We're just trapped at this point.
And so we're going to get back to our something happened on Sunday. Okay, we're going to go through it all the way through today. You're going to hear about this. So my usual two beliefs about myself that get triggered the most are one, that I'm a throwaway. I don't matter. And so the first clue that I have that this belief is now being activated is that I start to feel really fearful. And this goes back to my father and the abuse that, that I experienced as a child, right? I was really, really scared of him. And so I recognize that this belief about myself that I don't, that I don't matter, that I'm a throwaway, by these anxious thoughts that I start to have, right? I start noticing the stories that I'm running of I'm unsafe, right? These stories that start spinning, I start to feel like I'm swirling in this vortex of emotion. And the feeling that's uppermost for me is, oh no, right? This, oh no, right? And so the other belief that I have about myself is that I'm a mistake. And the first clue that I have of this is this sense of, oh, what have I done? What have I done now? How am I wrong, right? And I recognize this by this fearful tension, right? This pressure, this constriction, this tightness, right? This feeling of getting caught. And the fear that grips me in that moment is so powerful.
When I get triggered, what's usually happening for me is one of a couple things, right? One of my beliefs is, I don't matter, the same as Maria. But when that is happening for me, my first clue is I'm getting pissed off. I'm getting annoyed, right? I start to recognize this by, if I have enough awareness, by noticing that I feel tense, tight. I feel frustrated, annoyed, vibrating. I call it twitchy. Too much caffeine. I start vibrating inside. And the second thing that happens for me, this second belief that I have, is that I am wrong. And it's not that I have done something wrong. It is that I, who I inherently am, is simply wrong. And my clue about that one happening is a sense of panic, that I get very panicky, that I feel dizzy, my pulse is racing. I get these wild thoughts of I'm going to screw this up, I am going to fail. I have that level of that kind of runaway feeling, or oh no, the sky is falling feeling going on inside me. And as we said before, like it was right at the very beginning, these are indicators that that ancient survival brain is in operation, and it connects this current feeling to some past event or feelings that we don't want to happen again. That's its purpose. Our entire mindset and our biochemistry are at odds with any idea of self-compassion or other compassion. We're just armed to defend ourselves as if our survival depended on it, and it very well might have in the past. Right? It's like watching a scary movie and being gripped by fearful thoughts and fear as we're watching the movie. We respond as if we're experiencing reality. Right? We're so engrossed that even though it's a movie, and even though we know we're in a movie in some place, we respond as if it's actually all happening to us right here, right now. Right? So in this moment of something happens for me, I'm feeling panic about the lecture. All right, about this talk, about this discussion, right? And I blurt out, "You're like a Jackson Pollock painting. I thought I don't have a map. I'm completely lost." I launch.
And I hear, you're like a you're like a Jackson Pollock painting, no comma. Not you're like an artist like Jackson Pollock painting a painting. There is no comma there, right? But you are the painting itself. You're a mess. You are wrong and bad, and you have done it wrong, and you are a mistake. And so the amplification is mine. He did say that, and his tone was a bit off, right? But the amplification, I was being nice to you.
I had tone.
You had tone. But the amplification is mine, right? And my brain's negativity bias is always looking for confirmation that I am a mistake, right? So what I hear is, you are a Jackson Pollock painting. You are, which I somehow twist into meaning I am a mess, right? I'm not the artist. I'm the messy painting itself. Sorry, Jackson Pollock.
So another frame of reference for all this, we're going to go back to Dr. Seuss, since we're talking about childhood, to expand on this idea that we are no longer a we in the middle of this relationship, right? 1984, Dr. Seuss published this fabulous book called The Butter Battle Book. It's a story of two societies of creatures who build a wall between one another and engage in an arms race that ends in a nuclear standoff. What leads to this? The Ukes believe everyone should butter their bread butter side up.
Yes.
The Zooks believe everyone should butter their bread butter side down. Both sides think their way is the right and only way.
And so in relationship, we can often feel like we are on opposing sides of a war. Does anybody have that experience in the room? Or is it just us? So depending on your family system, this could feel like a very, very cold war. Or if you're from my family system, very, very, very heated war. And so this is the trance that we were talking about, taken to the nth degree, right? So the Ukes and the Zooks are child's play compared to what we can get up to in relationship, right? In primary relationship especially, our moats are far deeper, our guillotines are sharper, and our alligators are really a lot meaner. So back to the something happened on Sunday. All I want to do in that moment when I feel the impact of you are a Jackson Pollock painting, right, is I want to disappear. I can feel behind my eyes, I can feel the tears starting, right? And then I notice there's this rush of defensive energy and the tears pull back.
Right? Meanwhile, for me, I'm in this place of I'm okay. I just need it done my way. Because that is the right way to do this.
It is the right way to do it if you're a uke. Okay.
So again, how does this happen? How do we get into this place? Right? For the most part, we get into these difficulties because of things we are not aware of. Right? We speak about the basement in Clear Mind, right? And this particular diagram, this circular diagram of the conscious and unconscious, which called the line of awareness, was created by Joseph Campbell. And it really speaks to how come we can enter into this trance, into this state, and remain in it, attached to it, believing it to be reality, acting as if it actually is. Above the line is everything we're conscious of. We're awake to our own experience. We're aware of being in the present moment. We are responsive to our own feelings, responsive to others. We feel balanced. We feel open, receptive, right? And from a neuroscience point of view, this is where we are operating from our wonderful neocortex primate human brain, able to be focused and nervous system, able to be focused on attaching to an us, connecting. Right? This is the last portion of our nervous system to be wired up or to come online.
And below the line, right, this is the basement that Clear Mind talks about as well, right? Below this line is everything that's outside of our conscious awareness for the most part, right? These beliefs about ourselves, about others, about the world, all of these thoughts and feelings and memories and fears and emotionally charged stories, aversions, conditioning, all of that is below this line of awareness. And we can really feel a level of dissociation here as well. We can feel so gripped by emotions, so caught in our own suffering that we can feel a level of dissociation here as well. The point is that to the degree that we are either responding or living below the line of awareness, we are caught in a trance for the most part. This is where we are in a familiar story of our own created reality. We can feel really alone there, really separate, threatened, incomplete, and in some ways highly defended too, right? Things like chronic blame or, a defended stance, resentment, feeling victimized, right? Anger. All of these are potential signs of an unconscious trance. And so, for the most part, we live below the line, right? Lost in our unconscious efforts to, to control life and seeing it from the lens of our preconditioning. But we're not aware that that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And how this ties into neuroscience as well is, again, that reptilian brain, the good old brain stem focused on avoiding harms, keeping us safe. That's the oldest portion of our nervous system, the first to be wired up. So it's old, it's deep, and it is entrenched, right? And then we have the mammalian brain, the subcortex, and all of its nervous system attached, which is more interested in focusing on approaching rewards or approaching goals, right? And it's the second portion of our brain to come online as we're developing. In this area, in this mammalian spot, we're consciously aware of our goal. So it kind of rides between the both because we are consciously aware of a goal, but we may not be aware of what's inside of us that is driving us to that goal, or even what's involved in selecting that specific goal in the first place, right? That maybe that's also coming from something unconscious. So unconsciously, back to us, and our something happens here. Unconsciously, in my upset feelings about writing this talk and all the process we went through, I am feeling everything I felt when I had some written project that was due in grade school. I would beat my head against a wall right to the end. I had writer's block. I couldn't do anything. I hated it. Every single time, I always felt lost, like I was going to fail. I once wrote a 7th grade report at 3 a.m. the day it was due, right? I am silently reliving that experience for a week before I finally have my Jackson Pollock outburst at Maria and about Maria.
Mm-hmm. And for me, unconsciously, the feelings are so familiar, right? I am a mistake, right? I'm not safe. It's not okay to be me, right? And that's a really familiar feeling for me.
Right. So
I quite love her. I'm just saying. So
anyone relate?
Anybody relate to?
We're
No.
watching you, prac students.
Seriously, I don't want to look inside. So awareness is the solution, right? To become aware of what is happening inside of us. And so when we're feeling strong emotions like fear, shame, or anger, we'll do almost anything rather than allow ourselves to feel those feelings. They're very unpleasant at best and really painful at worst. And so when we experience a traumatic event or repeated patterns of those unhelpful thoughts, let's call them that, or feelings or behaviors, we are creating deeply grooved patterns of emotional reactivity. You've heard the phrase, right? Neurons that fire together, wire together, meaning these patterns create and reinforce neural networks in our brains. And so what it means is that mental states become neural traits. So day by day, our mind, which are our thoughts and our emotions, all of that, is building our brain. Right? So literally what thoughts and emotions we have the most are the ones that are going to be reinforced, are the ones that we're going to have the most.
Right. This means the more that you think and rethink about certain experiences, the stronger the memory and the more easily activated those related feelings become. So notice this isn't simply about having the experience, right? This is also about imagining or replaying it in our mind, which triggers the exact same neurological pathways as the real event, possibly even more so because we are really fixating on the feeling aspect of it when we are replaying and imagining. So if we wonder why we lock into painful emotional states like anxiety, depression, rage, we might need to look no further than our own endless stream of inner dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So, to interrupt our compulsive, critical, and painful thinking, we need to purposely bring attention to our inner experience so that we can start to shift the attention, right, from the other person or from our painful thoughts or our emotionally driven stories, and become aware of what's inside of us so that we can pull ourselves out of that trance and into presence. It's like in those moments, I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, but I have. Steve could attest to this because he scares me often with these. You know, when you're sitting in a really scary movie, I'm feeling all the feels, right? I am in a state of terror. Then in a moment, you know, we come back to awareness, right? We notice, oh, I'm sitting on a chair, right? And we feel ourselves breathing. Ah, I'm breathing. Oh, I'm just watching a movie. We're coming back into presence. And so in that experience, we feel everything, right? That even though it's not happening to us, we are still feeling everything.
So for me, in our moment there, this is what I've been doing, right? I've been ruminating on this bad feeling, and it is not helping my situation. Neither is not really sharing it in any way that I feel like I have been understood by Maria when I do talk about it. I just feel more frustrated. And this whole thing, this loop, just leaves me feeling worse.
And my feelings of I'm a mistake are pretty unbearable, right? Nobody wants to feel that for a long time. But if I look out and I find him the bad guy, then I can make him the unreal other and I can punish him for what I feel, therefore relieving my feelings just a bit. And so very soon, this little wee victim-y voice, you know, I can detect her in the distance becoming a little bit louder, right? And she's saying, after all the work I've done all week, he rushes in the last moment and he pees on my parade.
That's me. So, a couple more bits of neuroscience, right? Around how can we get out of this place, this trance. We know that by changing our pattern of thinking, feeling, and believing, we can change our neural networks. Changing our pattern of thinking, feeling, and believing, and behaving is what Claremind's all about, right? It changes our neural networks. In the book, My Stroke of Insight, brain scientist Jill Bolte Taylor explains the natural lifespan of any emotion is 90 seconds. I'll let you think about that for a moment. Meaning, the average time it takes for that emotion, the neurochemicals that you interpret as a feeling, right, to move through your nervous system, through your body, is a minute and a half. Done. No matter how intense or distressing. That initial rush of chemicals takes 90 seconds to take hold, crest, and dissipate completely. Once that 90 seconds is up, the sensations are no longer being caused by the original stimulus any longer. Any prolonged emotional response is caused by us actively dwelling on those thoughts and feelings, recycling the same 90 seconds over and over. So that's what I'm doing for a week, silently, feeling lost, without a map, more and more frustrated. No wonder I'm feeling more and more frustrated.
And so I want to talk to you about the magic quarter second. Well, because, you know, I'm a Jackson Pollock painting. I like magic, right? So researcher Benjamin, I think it's Lebay, but I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name, who studies the neuroscience of free will, he discovered that the part of the brain that's responsible for movement activates a quarter second before we become aware of our intention to move. So there is then another quarter second before the movement actually begins. And before we're even consciously aware of having the thought or the impulse or the reaction, it has already begun in our body. And so, contrary to our perceived experience, our thought, I'm going to move, right, is at the end of the process, not at the beginning. And author Tara Beth Goldman named this space the magic quarter second. And what it is this gap, right, between intention and action. So it's a pause that we can take to make a clearer choice, decide how we're going to respond, how we're going to behave. And so by catching our thoughts in the magic quarter second, we're able to act from hopefully a wiser place, right? A more concerted place rather than continuing that cycle that fuels our anxiety and other painful emotions. So for instance, if we're really upset by something, we're sitting down, at our computers and we're composing a really angry email, right? If we use that magic quarter second, we might pause and decide not to press that send button.
So, what can we do to get out of this?
Almost 20 years ago, a number of Buddhist teachers began to share a mindfulness tool that offers in the trenches support for working with intense and difficult emotions. So it's called RAIN, which is just an acronym for the 4 steps of the process. It directs our attention inward in a really, really clear way that allows us to pause and reconnect with a wise, compassionate presence, right? And each time that we're willing to slow down and recognize, oh, right, I'm feeling anger, or this is fear inside me, or this is hurt, or oh, I'm feeling judgment. We can then start to make a different choice.
All right. So, RAIN, recognize what is happening, allowing life to be just as it is in that moment, investigate our inner experience with kindness, and non-identification. This isn't personal. Or nurture with self-compassion, or both. So the work we do at ClearMind is depth work. It's experiential, and it shifts our relationship to our beliefs about ourselves. This practice of RAIN is not about shifting those beliefs, but about coming into the present moment, into awareness that we have those beliefs, that we have an opportunity to befriend ourselves here in the middle of the process. And in so doing, allow us to have the opportunity to be present to and befriend the other as well. Right? So the R, recognize what's happening. What's happening inside me? What am I believing about myself? What am I believing about the other? This recognition means consciously acknowledging in any given moment the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are affecting us, inside of us. Right? Like awakening from the movie, like that moment of realizing you're in watching a movie. The first step out of this trance state is simply to recognize that we're actually feeling something. Right? So things we can look for, as Maria said, she gave some ideas a moment ago, right? Also things like, do I have a critical inner voice? Feelings of shame, fear, anxiety, or depression in my body? Am I feeling heavy? Am I feeling squeezed? What's going on? Notice, what am I feeling? So again, back to our little old something happens. I notice that I feel panicked. I feel distressed. My heart is pounding. I feel unheard, misunderstood. I feel friendless. At this point in this process, I'm not connecting this to my childhood experience at all. The feelings are still internally overwhelming my ability to be curious about any of that. And I'm simply recognizing what's happening.
And this is a really familiar trance for me. It is the trance of unfairness, right? This is the call sign of most overfunctioners that I know, me being one of them in recovery, right? Here's the call. After all I have done this week. And so I'm now recognizing this, but the feelings are still there. And so the next step is to allow life to be just as it is. And the question that I ask, and again, this is based on Buddhist study and perspective, and you can find this just about anywhere, most books, and right, is really, can I be with this, right? This wording so landed for me. Can I be with this? Meaning, can I be with this inside me? Right? And so this second step is really about pausing and allowing and choosing to be present with our moment to moment experience. And it's really natural, at least it is for me, to feel resistance to this part of the process at the very beginning, right? We really wish that the feelings would just go away, or that we could, do something about them and point to the other. And so in that moment, you can include that too, the thought, I hate that I'm feeling this. And the question again becomes, can I be with this? So allowing means letting the thoughts, the emotions, the feelings, the sensations, whatever we have recognized in the prior step, right? Simply to be there without trying to fix, without trying to avoid any of it. And so we're not agreeing or disagreeing with the feelings or the thoughts or whatever, right? We just accept that we have those thoughts without judging them. And so in this allowing, we aren't so much reducing the feelings themselves or addressing them in any way, really. What we're doing is we're befriending the feeler, the one who is feeling. And this process of acceptance radically shifts our relationship to our difficult feelings. In psychology, this is actually also known as affect tolerance, which also builds emotional resilience. So in our something happens, right? In the moment that I am poised to strike,
Strikes like a cobra.
and make him really, really sorry for being an underfunctioner, and especially for calling me a Jackson Pollock painting, right? I can make him feel really, really sorry. And so in that moment, instead, right, I close my eyes and I bring my hands to my heart. And these two gestures, the closing of my eyes and the bringing my hands to my heart, are what I use to come inside, not to shut him out, to come inside so I can meet him at some point, right? And so I breathe and I allow, right? And I start to notice that the feelings that sustain the defense, that defense that was emerging in me, right, they begin to fade. And the tender feelings underneath begin to emerge. And by the tender, I mean the hurting ones, right? They begin to emerge. And I start to feel like I did when I was little, right? And I was shamed in front of, the class that I was in. I was just a wee kid, right? And there were bigger kids than me, and I was in, school early, and I didn't know anything about math, but I was a great reader, right? But I didn't know anything about math. And so I was standing at the blackboard and I did not know what to do, right? And so there was a lot of jeering and, shaming at that point. And so that's the feeling. And I felt really, really sad, right? In this moment, just like I did back then. And I'm noticing this feeling is coming up. I felt alone. I felt wrong somehow. And that's the feeling that's coming to the surface now. And so I embrace those feelings, right? And I let them be what they are, and they soften. The moment that there's this befriending, there's also a softening, a receding of the harshness of that feeling.
And for me, I start taking some deep breaths and noticing exactly what's going on inside of myself instead of being annoyed at something else that's happening that I'm putting on Maria. I'm noticing what's going on inside myself. And as I notice those feelings, I start to calm down. Instead of resisting them, I simply let them be there, including the feelings I'm having about Maria or about the project or about whatever we're doing. I just let it all be what it is inside of me and allow myself to allow it and just allow them to exist inside me and to notice them.
Mm.
Right. And then we investigate, right? Is this really true? right? This piece is geared towards, loosening a little bit of the grip of those beliefs that are causing the upset, right? That belief about me, right? As we bring our full attention into our body in that previous step, allowing life to be what it is, then we start to step inward and investigate. We bring our attention in and find out what's happening inside, letting go of our thoughts about the other or about what happened, even, right? Because our upset thoughts and feelings live inside our body, right? It's not about someone else. Notice inside ourselves, where are they strongest? Where do we feel the most distress? What do we need here? Acceptance, understanding, forgiveness, compassion. If you want to go deeper with this, you can start asking at this piece, at this step in the process is, how has this affected my life, my relationship? How much do I feel this? How often? So again, in this something happened moment, we both notice that this is a familiar feeling for both of us.
We're, in essence, contacting the one in the basement now, right? Okay.
How'd that be me? So again, the N of non-identification, right? This isn't personal, right? We stop making, as we're taking this trip, we can stop making the experience mine or about me. We can ask internally, is this who I really am? Is this thing that's happening here, even this thing that's happening in here, is this really who I am? I'm not my mind. I'm not my emotions. I'm not the something that happens. Right? The first three steps, the R, the A, the I, require some intentional activity. This is the result. We can simply land in a natural awareness of, who am I?
And, there are two, you'll find that if you look up rain, right, you'll find that there is, the non-identification, which was the original usage. And some folks have really started to use the N to mean nurturing with self-compassion. And I prefer this one and always have, right? So self-compassion begins to naturally arise in the moments that we recognize that we are suffering, that we hurt. And so our neural networks down in the most ancient layers of our brain, of our mind, begin to receive these calming images. And as our body settles down and begins to feel more regulated, it sends feedback up into our brain that all is well, or at least not so bad anymore, right? So this nurturing with self-compassion is so powerful. And we'll talk a little bit about how it come in a minute, right? And so as I'm going through these four, right, and I'm landing in this compassion for myself, right, this deep caring that I'm extending to myself, because those are painful feelings. I know that they're not true, but they feel painful, right? And I'm also wanting to extend that to him now. So I've extended that nurturing to me, that compassion to me, and the immediate response inside me is that I want to extend it to him too, right? His feelings must be really painful too. And so I know Steve, I know his wounds, and now I am free, right, to care about him actively. And so I feel tender with me and I feel tender with him, right? I see him, and now I can see him because I'm no longer in a trance, right? And I feel deep compassion for him. And so I ask him, what is happening for you, right? What is happening for you? And what are you feeling? And there's this little interesting part. I'm not sure if you noticed it or not, but even before I opened my eyes, right? So my eyes are closed and my hands on my heart, and I'm going through this process, right? And this takes me less than, I don't know, 3-4 minutes max. And even before I open my eyes, I feel his hand on my knee, right? He's the whole time he's sitting here with me, kind of huffing and puffing, right? And I feel his hand on my knee, and I hear him say, I'm not saying it's your fault. Right? I hear him saying that, but I'm in my own experience at the moment, but I note this, right? And I wonder what happened for him when I closed my eyes and put my hand on my heart, right? And how, you know, is it possible? I mean, and I don't, we haven't talked about this, but that in the moment when I'm now inhabiting myself as opposed to wanting to kind of strike, right? I wonder if there's enough space inside him. But I'm going off a bit, right? So I just wanted to say that felt really interesting to me in that moment.
Mm-hmm. For me in that moment, I mean, I'm aware of your actions. Like I saw you close your eyes. I saw you lean back for a sec. I saw you put your hand on your chest. I'm not aware of how come I chose that moment to then extend my hand to you. It is interesting, though,
Yeah.
right? Because at that moment, after that experience, I start to share with Maria some of the deeper feelings that I've not shared before as we've been talking about it, right? And for whatever reason, maybe I wasn't aware of them even myself, but I've become more aware of what's going on for myself at a deeper level. And I start to share that. And in the sharing, I am aware. Clear, this is my problem. It's not about how you do what you do. I love your creativity and how you go about everything you do. I just don't know how that ever works because I'm mystified. I am constantly mystified how you do what you do, even though, right, in this moment, I'm talking about our shared experience. I'm clear that I'm the one who has a problem. I still don't know anything about how come it's happening. This is a new piece. I haven't landed on this piece before. But as I keep sharing, my inner awareness shifts. And as I continue talking, I spontaneously remember my 7th grade report.
Yeah, you've never shared that with me before.
I totally, yeah. And now I can remember it. I even have the visuals. It's like I'm back there sitting at my desk, little desk light.
Okay.
So taking these steps with myself brings me back into relationship with me. And at the same time, we're sharing a moment and working through it together, which nurtures both of us individually and our relationship. I feel understood. I feel easier. I feel more connected with Maria. I feel connected to the project again. And strangely enough, within the next 5 minutes, she says something. Somehow we have this weird little conversation and something shifts about how we're discussing this talk, and everything about it makes sense to me from that point on.
Yeah.
Go figure.
And so in rain, we are coming into presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feeling compassion for ourselves, which opens us up to feeling compassion for others. And so it's really interesting to me, and I read this somewhere, and I wish I could tell you where, but I can't, right? To note the difference between empathy and compassion, because sometimes we can feel like they are one and the same. And so I went looking for this and I found it and I felt very excited. So empathy is our capacity to feel the emotions of others, while compassion begins with empathy, but includes the mindfulness and the care inherent in compassion, fosters resilience, connectedness, and action. And it's this action part that I love, right? Compassion is active.
Right. And neuroscientists have been able to detect clear differences in how these two states are processed in the brain. Empathy activates areas linked to emotion, self-awareness, and pain. Interesting. And compassion stimulates areas associated with care and nurturing. Compassion also stimulates the secretion of oxytocin, the bonding hormone released during lovemaking and breastfeeding. Who knew?
All right. So where does our sense of empathy and compassion come from? Right? Why do we feel tears when we see a loved one cry, or why do we kind of wince and, do that, right, when we see other people hurting themselves, right? So I'm noticing time, Steve. I just noticed time. So since his discovery in 1991, the research group of Giacomo Rizzolatti assumes that mirror neurons form the biological basis of compassion and thereby of effective empathic experiencing. And the discovery of mirror neurons allows a comprehension of empathy as immediate and compassionate partaking of a response. This is a quote, enabling an understanding of the other person's feeling. Now, I know that Dwayne and Kath talk a lot about these mirror neurons, and I love them, and we're not going to go into them, right? But it's really interesting to note this. There's that quote that you...
Yeah, so I love this quote about mirror neurons, about this piece. The line between perceiving and hallucinating is not as crisp as we like to think. In a sense, when we look at the world, we are hallucinating all the time. One could almost regard perception as the act of choosing the one hallucination that best fits all of the incoming data. I love that.
Pick your hallucination, right? So a really sweet story that I love. And this story originates from the book Contact, the first 4 minutes. The Babemba tribe of Africa, right, believes that each human being comes into the world as good, and each one of us only desiring safety, love, peace, and happiness. But of course, being human, right, people are going to make mistakes along the way. And so when a person makes a mistake in this tribe, in this village, right, they're placed in the center of the village alone, unfettered, and all work ceases in the village. Then all gather around this individual, and then each person of every age, right, starts to speak all the good things, all the positive attributes, the good deeds, the strengths, the kindnesses to the one in the center that they have, done all of their lives. And so this can last for several days. And at the end, the circle is broken, right? And the celebration takes place, the huge celebration, and the person is symbolically and literally welcomed back into the tribe.
Right. When we're trapped in some sense of self-judgment, our perceptual filters narrow and our mirroring becomes distorted. We're monitoring ourselves now to find out how we're falling short. We become preoccupied with hiding our inadequacies, staying busy justifying ourselves, proving or improving ourselves. And then this self-mistrust inevitably extends to others. When we feel seen, heard, and responded to with care, the message we receive is you matter, you belong, you are loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that is the essence of what that tribe does, right? It is mirroring that goodness back to them over and over again. Right?
In order to mirror the goodness in the other, it requires compassion, first for ourselves, so that we can then extend it to the other.
Okay. And so we can't, mirror our basic goodness without being vulnerable ourselves to our own goodness and recognizing it in us, right? So if you were an onion, it would be like shedding the layers, right, of that onion, layer by layer, getting closer and closer to our core, to the center of who we really are. And every time we shed a layer, we feel more exposed and more vulnerable. Right? And poet Mark Nepo, who I adore, describes this shedding of the layers as taking the exquisite risk. And we learn to be with the vulnerability inside of us, right? And then we can begin to be more real, more engaged with others without the masks that we normally wear. And bit by bit, we start to let go of that old defense system that, we have those defense systems because in some way they must have, brought us some security, some certainty, something, right? And we start to let them go, and we exchange those defense systems for what is really unfamiliar. And so to humans, often scary because unfamiliar is scary, right? But it's way more real and way, way more alive. I love this quote from a Buddhist nun in the 1500s, and she said, "I meet this life with my whole body. I want to be her." So that is an exquisite risk, right? The problem is that we are very, very attached to and identified with our little onion selves, our little onion cocoons, right? Every one of us, right? That is our conditioning, and it's not our fault. But our story doesn't have to stop there, right? We can change our minds, and we can change our brains, and we can change our relationships. And so this exquisite risk, I love it because this is what we do at Clear Mind constantly. It is the foundation, from my perspective, absolutely the foundation beneath everything that we do, meaning having the courage to be real and undefended, right? Risking being seen and being known. And so that to me is everything.
Right? It requires courage to care. Investing emotionally in another human being is in itself a vulnerable act. Right? I read somewhere that vengeance is a lazy form of grief, meaning that blaming others is easier than facing the reality of our own hurts, our own fears, losses. When we're able to stop blaming and instead become responsible for our own experience in a compassionate way, we are then able to extend the compassion to each other. I know I want to pound on the table.
I know, me too, but we can.
When we're in our trance, we're preoccupied, reactive, anxious, we're on autopilot, right? We're often blind to the goodness of others. Lovely quote from a Tibetan teacher that says, the essence of human bravery is refusing to give up on anyone.
Yes.
Taking the risk to become a mirror of goodness to others is a deliberate practice in compassion.
Mm-hmm. And so here we are at the end of our talk with you today, right? And the title of this talk is Fearless Heart, right? And so a fearless heart is really just a compassionate heart. When we're deeply connected to our own experience and we extend compassion to ourselves in the middle of that experience, no matter what, right? We can then be open and vulnerable with our loved ones too. And we can accept and hold them in their vulnerability with kindness and with deep compassion. And so that fearless heart is a heart that can attune to our own needs and to our pain, and also to the pain of others, right? And the needs of others, even when we're in the middle of experiencing fear. So it's a fearless heart in the sense that it faces fear bravely and chooses love instead. And so a fearless heart purposefully seeks to befriend ourselves and the other. Sometimes it's harder to befriend ourselves and the other, to tell you the truth. For me anyway, I find that sometimes, right? And so when we turn toward the other with compassion, it's like we're asking, what is it like being you? Or where do you hurt? And truly wanting to know. And that's the active part of compassion that goes beyond empathy that I find so, so important. And so with true compassion, we feel the other person's experience as our shared human vulnerability, and we want to care for that vulnerability.
Right. True healing grows from the wisdom of our interdependence. When we're in it together, we're a we. Our lives are linked in mutual care and belonging. And this is the essence of walking each other home.